Zach and his sister Dora live next to the creepiest artist you've ever met. I mean, this dude's wife got killed. And you know his assistant is missing? Dora, today I heard Mr. Hinesmith and his assistant got in a fight. I never saw her leave today, said Zach. Wow, that's weird, said Dora. Yeah, said Zach. We're going to have to investigate, said Dora. So that night, Zach and Dora spied on Mr. Hinesmith in hopes to find out what happened to Mrs. Quinlan. See anything yet, said Dora. Yes, said Zach. What, said Dora. He's putting a suitcase in his car, but I don't see Mrs. Quinlan, said Zach. I wonder where she is, said Dora. Yes, said Zach suspiciously. We should go and investigate, exclaimed Dora. So Zach and Dora went to the library to do some research on Mr. Hinesmith. It says here that Mrs. Hinesmith was killed by a burglar in the house, said Zach. That's crazy, said Dora. It says that an ex-boxer killed his wife, but police never found him, said Zach. Do you think Mr. Hinesmith killed all three of them? That's a good guess, maybe, said Zach. We should call the police, said Dora. So Zach and Dora called the police. 10 minutes later, the sheriff showed up at Mr. Hinesmith's house with Zach and Dora. They knocked on his door, and Mr. Hinesmith answered. Good day, the officer said. These kids tell me you killed your assistant, Mrs. Quinlan, said the officer. Heavens no, said Mr. Quinlan. That's crazy, said Mr. Hinesmith. Then explain where she is, said the officer. So Mr. Hinesmith let them in so he could explain. I dropped her off at the train station. She said she was going to a little town in the Midwest, said Mr. Hinesmith. Do you see, officer? Said Mr. Hinesmith. Yeah, the officer said suspiciously. The officer didn't believe him because 2 days ago they found missing luggage by the name of Mrs. Quinlan in Florida. Okay, Mr. Hinesmith, explain how Mrs. Quinlan's luggage was found in Florida, said the officer. And is Jenkins in the house? Asked Zach. Mr. Hinesmith's eyes grew wide. You remember the one you hired to kill your wife? Said Zach. And how do you explain the perfect statue of a boxer in the other room? Said Zach. Or is Jenkins inside the sculpture? Why, yes, said Mr. Hinesmith. So is Mrs. Quinlan and many other people, said Mr. Hinesmith. And so the officer arrested him, and they locked him up for the rest of his miserable days.